Hello everyone, this is part 27 of What If Naruto Passed the Genin test, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. 10 piercing shrieks rang out through the cold dark. There was a brief silence before the air split in the wake of another set of 10 shrieks, followed by the thud of something diamond hard striking a concrete wall. At one end of the nearly lightless room, a metal plate almost 6 inches thick leaned haplessly against the wall, 20 finger-sized holes punched clean through the cold iron. Lined up perfectly with each hole was a small white projectile embedded in the wall. 50 yards away, Kaguya Kimimaro flexed his hands but stood otherwise motionless. His breathing was imperceivable under his perfect composure, until with no warning his eyes burst open. Before the frigid air could whirl around him, he had spun fluidly, whipping his arms in an invisibly fast arc. With a flick of his wrists, Kimimaro pointed his hand toward the iron sheet and taken aim. As the air began to whine in response to Kimimaro's motions, the ninja had finished spinning in a perfect circle and 10 more holes had appeared in the metal sheet. It was another fraction of a second before the metal shrieked from the tears Kimimaro's attack had sped in it, and almost a half second longer before the air slapped back together from being split by the finger bullets. Again, Kimimaro flexed his hands as the bones regenerated in his fingers. Faster than the speed of sound, Kimimaro-kun, said a voice like frozen oil as the door to the room creaked open and Orochimaru stepped in without the sound of a footfall. You've improved even in your illness. Before you struggled to even approach such velocity. And still too slow, Orochimaru-sama, said Kimimaro coolly as he turned around and got on one knee. The bones fly faster than the eye can see, and I can spin faster than the speed of sound to propel the attack to supersonic speeds, but it still doesn't do enough damage to a single target. Orochimaru grinned and put a hand on the Kaguya's shoulder and stood him on his feet. And who do you think is capable of surviving such an attack? Surely none of the ninja you're to confront. None of the ninja I am to confront are our greatest enemies, said the white-haired nin. Kimimaro, you shouldn't complain, said the Sannin, walking forward to examine the perforated plate of armor-grade metal. Kimimaro followed his master. 30 sly shots. Any one of them would be fatal to anyone less than Tsunade, Jiraiya, or a few other select individuals. The first two are the ones you've specifically forbidden me from engaging, commented Kimimaro. Orochimaru-sama, you yourself have said I would match a cage on the open battlefield. You've said that strength for strength and skill against skill I'm above even Gaara of the desert, so why not let me make full use of my talents in your service? Why not let me attack Naruto head on and remove him from our path? My life would be a small price to pay for his. Wrong, said Orochimaru flatly, turning around. Activate the seal to level 2 as fast as you can. Without a second thought, Kimimaro leapt off his feet and flipped backwards in the air. His form went black as pitch as a seal rocketed over his skin. By the time he landed on his feet less than a second later, a tail had sprouted from his lower back and his skin had turned a quiet purple. Reduce the sheet of iron to 150 different pieces, ordered the Sannin casually. Immediately Kimimaro charged forward faster than any normal human's eye would be able to register, as bones like the blades of swords erupted from his forearms and wrists. He twirled through the air like a dervish and landed next to the plate of iron, and spun around once more, though this time he was an invisible roar of wind. As the wind caught up to him, Kimimaro stepped back and the sheet fell apart along dozens of perfectly clean seams and dropped to ground like an emptied-out coin purse. The white-haired ninja glanced at Orochimaru and waited for his next order. None came for a long minute as the Sannin Street USD his servant. The seconds ticked by, but Kimimaro didn't let the bones recede back into his body. Instead he lengthened them subtly in case he needed to perform some other task to impress Orochimaru. I could pit you against any of our greatest enemies, said the Sannin, smiling wickedly, Tsunade, Naruto, or even perhaps Jiraiya, and rightly expect that they would not survive the encounter. However, neither would you, and at this point your life is more valuable to our cause than the deaths. You have much more potential while alive than S. But someday it may be desperate enough that I'm required to commit such an act, said Kimimaro, and should that day arrive, I'll welcome it. Why so gruesome? Asked the Sannin, turning around to face the nin. You should be dwelling on how best to use your life rather than how best to s. Just remember that you can best serve me alive. Kimimaro winced, chastised. I'll remember that, Orochimaru-sama. Good. Now come with me. I would like you to be present at a very special summoning in case something should go wrong. I don't expect things will get out of hand, but on the off chance it would be nice to have someone reliable there. What are we doing? Asked Kimimaro respectfully as the bones receded into his body. He left the seal active at level 2 though. What kind of summoning? You'll see, said Orochimaru in a tone like how one would expect a snake to sound if snakes could speak. But I think you'll be impressed with how clever I'm being. Kimimaro nodded as he and the Sannin exited the room and the door closed behind them. The two ninja walked down the featureless and dimly lit concrete hall. Their breath looked as visible as an extension of their boss from the cold until the air abruptly warmed as they turned a bend in the passage. The Kaguya recoiled at the sudden spike in heat. For years he'd been used to temperatures below freezing at the warmest. This isn't too much for your constitution, is it, Kimimaro-kun? Asked Orochimaru. It was after all only yesterday that Kabuto told me you'd need a week to fully recover, and I don't want to put you at risk. I'm fine, said Kimimaro, straightening himself up. Just caught off guard a little. I knew you'd answer something like that, said the Sannin unaffectedly as they reached an abrupt end in the hall. There appeared to be no door in the wall. Here we are now. The Kaguya watched as Orochimaru waved his hand over the wall and a black seal in the shape of a gigantic fiery bird appeared all over the wall. A crease shot down the exact center of the rampant phoenix, and two massive slabs of stone, each one weighing no less than 2 tons, slid back silently like a well-oiled door. From the new entrance a strange and faint green light emanated. In short pulses it would change from emerald green to a sickly purple, to some strange and darkly tinted turquoise. The light somehow seemed to pervade not only the air but everything from the concrete floor and ceiling to the sound of the ninjas breathing. It set Kimimaro, a seasoned veteran and ruthless warrior, on edge, and nothing escaped the sense of anxiety it brought with it. Orochimaru noticed the minuscule change in the Kaguya's demeanor and saw how he lowered to an ever so slightly defensive pose. It made the Sannin grin. Smells like death, doesn't it? Asked Orochimaru, almost giddily. It's a wonderful thing. If you insist, said Kimimaro, his composure still mostly firmly in place. What in the hell is it? Just that. Kimimaro looked quizzically at the Sannin. I told you it was going to be a very special summon, said Orochimaru. You're not backing out on me now, are you? Kimimaro didn't answer but stood resolutely, determined to show no more fear. Go in, said the Sannin. If you really want to serve me, then walk in boldly. Kimimaro didn't so much as grimace but took a long stride through the door and into the glowing hallway beyond. He strode down the narrow corridor with his shoulders back and his cloak open to expose his chest. Though under his purple skin, the bones were ready to leap to his defense at less than an instant's notice. With every passing step the light grew a little brighter and the hall grew a little tighter. It wasn't 10 strides before Kimimaro, who could sense Orochimaru on his heels, couldn't see anything at all, but sensed with clarity that the hall had ended and he was now in a relatively large room with a low ceiling. Give your eyes a moment to adjust, said Orochimaru as he stepped up next to Kimimaro in the silently pulsing light. It should only take a couple of seconds. Kimimaro waited, but his eyes didn't want to acclimate to the seemingly extreme light. Though it was intensely bright, the light didn't hurt his eyes even if he looked directly into its source, which was located in the far corner of the room. Despite his best efforts, Kimimaro couldn't maintain a stone face when he looked into that corner. There was some presence there, and it made the usually unbreakable ninja uneasy. There were a few footsteps in the room and Kimimaro felt another presence approach. This one he immediately recognized as Uchiha Sasuke, Orochimaru's latest prodigy. You'd be amazed at how quickly it's progressing, said Sasuke. What should take days is taking hours. Which is why I brought Kimimaro-kun, said the Sannin. How far along is it? I'd say about 80%. The summon should be nearly complete in just under an hour. Personally, I'm not sure I want to be here when it wakes up. The last I saw of this thing was an absolute monstrosity. You've seen it before, interrupted Kimimaro, taking advantage of his seniority over Sasuke to get a word in. What exactly is going on here? We're trying again, said Orochimaru. Kimimaro could practically hear the grin in his master's voice, but as he looked around the room he realized that his eyes were beginning to adjust. He could clearly see the outline of Sasuke's form. The Uchiha's Sharingan was watching Orochimaru, who was rubbing his hands together in front of him. Trying what again? Asked the Kaguya, drawing the attention of the others to him. Enough riddles. Before anyone could answer him, Kimimaro felt a tremble run through the ground that silenced the room. No one spoke as a dull hum began to resonate from the light in the corner. Orochimaru positioned himself between Sasuke and Kimimaro and put his hands together in an unusual seal. Sasuke, this is where you come in, said Orochimaru as the humming grew louder. Kimimaro glanced over at Sasuke and saw that he had activated his Mangekyo and was staring into the light. The Kaguya could feel an icy energy flowing from Sasuke's eyes into the light, and he could almost taste the tension building in the humming air. The process is increasing at an exponential rate, said Sasuke calmly, 30 seconds until Advent. This is where the fun begins, said Orochimaru, glancing at Kimimaro with a grin. Just sit back and enjoy the show. Nothing can stop it now. What's going on? Asked the Kaguya. What are we summoning? 20 seconds, said Sasuke, an edge creeping into his voice. Orochimaru shifted into a lower stance and began running through a complex series of seals Kimimaro had never seen before. Purple energy began to swirl around his hands and docked down to the floor like a curtain. Sasuke, said the Sannin, make sure that when it arrives you quell its hunger as best you can until we make sure it's properly contained. Sasuke nodded as the humming in the air began to roar like a hurricane. The ground was trembling now and the light from the corner of the room was as intense as the sun. There was no movement of the air, indeed the air felt heavy and stale, but the roaring was growing louder and louder. Kimimaro saw that Orochimaru and Sasuke had stepped forward and formed themselves into a loose column around the corner. Orochimaru-sama, Kimimaro shouted over the bellowing filling the room, what the hell is going on? Orochimaru grinned as he spoke calmly. 3 years ago Uzumaki Naruto, in a fit of rage, managed to draw on nearly half of the power of the Kyuubi no Kitsune and Ka demon I'd unleashed on Konoha. 10 seconds, interrupted Sasuke, hunkering down. Unfortunately the Hyuga girl who was to house the demon lacked the physical constitution and conditioning to properly augment the demon's enormous, no, supreme might. I'm hoping the unique traits of this new vessel will perform better. The Hyuga demon, shouted Kimimaro just as all hell broke loose. Before anyone could answer, the light exploded. Everything was silenced, but Kimimaro felt his body impacted by a massive shockwave. If not for his unusual skeleton, he was sure, he would have shattered beneath the blow. As the invisible and inaudible wave of energy rolled by, the boom caught up to it and Kimimaro's head nearly imploded under the massive pressure of the explosion of sound. It sounded not so much like an explosion, but an unearthly wail, high and piercing but at the same time low and rumbling. Everything was shaking, from the concrete floor to the walls, to Kimimaro's very bones. The Kaguya raised his hands up in front of his face as the light became too much to look into. It was wildly flashing green, lavender, and turquoise like a nova. Hold it, slay! Orochimaru screamed at Sasuke. Orochimaru-sama, shouted Kimimaro. And then it was over. In an instant the noise, the shaking and tumbling, it was all gone. The room was utterly silent. Kimimaro ventured to lower his arms and glance towards his companions. He could see by a dim glow that Orochimaru was standing up straight, a purple glow flowing around him like a robe. Sasuke looked to be in a daze. His posture was high and inflexible, but his eyes looked empty and tired without the Mangekyo or even his normal Sharingan. Perfect, muttered the Sannin, staring at the corner of the room, we couldn't have hoped for that to go any better. You did a good job, Sasuke. With the slightest disdain evident in his stance, Sasuke nodded patronizingly. My pleasure. The scorn was completely unveiled in his voice. Orochimaru ignored the blatant disrespect from his understudy, but Kimimaro couldn't help a slight twitch in his lips to bear a particularly sharp set of teeth. He was not pleased with Sasuke's behavior. Don't even think about it, Kaguya, said Sasuke, his face smeared with a wide grin. You didn't even have to read my mind, said Kimimaro, straightening himself up and turning to face Sasuke. His whole body would have been rigid with anger if not for his perfect self-control. Watch your mouth, you little mongrel pup. If not for Orochimaru-sama, I would have put you to sleep a long time ago. Orochimaru grinned as the two squared off. Do you plan on picking a bone with me? The raven-haired boy laughed at his own bad joke as he cynically mocked Kimimaro. You're too sickly to even serve your master properly. Kimimaro's lip twitched up again, but his composure held, despite the slight tremor that ran through his bones. The Kaguya glanced to Orochimaru, a silent question burning in his eyes. The Sannin chuckled a little but shook his head slightly from side to side. Kimimaro immediately took a step back, the dispute temporarily quelled. It doesn't matter anyway, said Sasuke tersely, crossing his arms. You're the stronger for now, but I'm too important for Orochimaru to let you have your way just yet. You shouldn't be so pretentious, Sasuke-kun, said Orochimaru quickly but in a controlled voice. You're not so important that I trust you to be the one to lead my armies in war. You should know that I handpicked Kimimaro even while he was still ill for that position, over you. You and your wars, interrupted Sasuke. What does it matter to me? It should mean the world to you that Orochimaru-sama even considers you worthy to stand in his presence, you little dung-shoveling croach, growled Kimimaro, show the proper respect. Our little Sasuke-kun is still fighting that seal, mused Orochimaru casually to himself. Even if he is incapable of disobedience, he still insists on disrespect. I wonder if his mind ever gets tired of the futile, albeit constant resistance. Children, Orochimaru said amusedly, enough of this bickering. Look at this, he pointed towards the corner of the room. We came here for this, not to bicker like brats. Continue your feud later. All eyes followed Orochimaru's gesture to where the blinding light had once been. Kimimaro saw that the glow in the room came from what looked to be a coffin laying up against one wall. It was carved with deep, dark runes and seals that took on the shape of some kind of bird rising into flight. Though, where the grain should have run there was not wood, but flecks of light, like stars embossed in ebony. At the head of the box there was a red seal in the form of a ring around a black field. The field was streaked with lines as red as blood that spelled out boldly, "Fear here abides." Is this what it should be? Asked Kimimaro carefully. You know what's inside, said Orochimaru, walking forward and laying a hand on the unsecured, but immovable lid of the coffin. The Hyuga demon is back in play, a pawn for a queen in the most literal sense. The Hyuga demon needs a vessel, said Sasuke. It can't exist on our plane without some kind of container, and it would be useless to house it in a box. Who's the lucky human? That's a surprise I won't spoil just yet, said the Sannin, tracing his fingers over the seals like an artist would admire a fine sculpture. But we should leave this place now. All is secure, but the chakra rolling off of this magnificent specimen might overwhelm the both of you. Besides, Kimimaro, I'd like to show you the troops. The Kaguya bowed low as the seal quickly receded into his body, leaving his skin nearly as pallid as the bones beneath. As you wish, Orochimaru-sama. I'll be more than happy to take my leave then if I'm no longer useful, said Sasuke tersely. Oh, one thing before you go, Orochimaru called after him as Sasuke walked quickly up the hall out of the room. Since things are moving more quickly than the initial plan, I'd like you to track down Kabuto. He's sure to be around here somewhere. Tell him to send the message to the Mizukage Kiri. Let him know that in 2 days, time will be up. I'll do that, Sasuke said flippantly, waving his hand as he left. Naruto scrambled to regain his balance, a lost cause due to his position on the ground on his backside, but nevertheless he managed to reach out and start scooping some of the scattered groceries. I'll pay for the damages, he reiterated quickly. Sorry, I should have been watching where I was going. Don't worry about it, Sakura answered just as fast, kneeling down and picking up some of the spilled produce that didn't look like it was beyond saving. It's not a huge problem. Her voice was quaking just a bit. Naruto got up on his knees and scanned the sidewalk in front of him, avoiding Sakura's eyes. The paper bag the kunoichi had been carrying split open as soon as it hit the ground and dropped all of its contents. There were several juicy fruits and vegetables that had set themselves irreparably against the concrete walk, along with a gallon jug of milk that had split as quickly as the bag of groceries. All in all, it was a superb mess that he'd made of things. I was in a hurry, Sakura was saying. But at any rate, Naruto realized that while he had been surveying the damages, Sakura was saying something that he guessed was an apology since she wasn't cursing loudly. He looked up and tried to look sorry, but he had trouble mustering an apologetic face rather than a blank stare. Sakura was down on one knee staring at a said apple on the sidewalk and dithering on about something Naruto didn't quite catch. She doesn't seem like quite the ice queen Shikamaru mentioned her to be, thought Naruto as his stare wandered down her exposed shoulder and arm. She's been working out like crazy, he noted when he saw just how defined she looked. Naruto? Sakura asked, snapping him out of his thoughts. Yeah, he said, looking up to her. Sorry, I was tallying up how much I owe you. Sakura grinned awkwardly but didn't say anything. For a minute or two neither one spoke as they both tried to avoid the other's gaze. People kept walking by, not paying them much, if any, attention, as the two ninja began to move and slowly get to their feet. So, Sakura stammered as she stood up and put one hand behind her head and looked away. What do you say? Ah, what? Naruto asked, caught off guard again. You didn't listen to a damn thing I just said, did you? Sakura asked, her frustration flaring. Well, Naruto stammered, I wasn't expecting to run into you like this. Do you think you can cut me a little slack? His tone was meant to come across as funny, but Naruto judged by the grimace on Sakura's face that he'd only managed to be abrasive. I'm still trying to get used to being back in a real village, he quickly added. As Sakura quickly checked her temper, she reached down and offered him a hand up. I wondered if you'd want to get a late lunch and talk, she said smiling. You've been gone a long time and it'd be nice to catch up. Naruto grinned and took her hand, getting to his feet. I'd like to, but, he said, looking down at himself and his mud-caked clothes. I'm a little less than presentable. Actually, I was just on my way to shop for some stuff to clean up with when we ran into each other. Without stepping back, Sakura gave Naruto a quick once-over, just now realizing how covered in dried mud and grime he was. Oh, she muttered, knowing that there wasn't a restaurant in town that would let Naruto in given his hygiene. I wondered why you were a brunette, she added jokingly. Funny. Besides, Naruto said, it's a little late for lunch, isn't it? The pink-haired kunoichi thought for a minute, well, we could have dinner at my place. Even with all of this, she gestured at the mess on the ground, I've still got enough to serve something decent. Naruto acted like he was going to say something but thought better of it and paused. For a few seconds he went back to examining the damages to Sakura's groceries. This wasn't supposed to happen, he thought to himself, his attitude almost indifferent, but bordering on anxious. I was hoping I could delay seeing her for at least several days, and not under circumstances anything like these. I wouldn't want to get your house dirty, said the blonde ninja, and all it would take is one step in and I guarantee that the place would never be clean again. Don't be silly, said Sakura tersely, obviously struggling to keep her temper in check. I'm offering to let you clean up at my place, or I already know things would get a little dirty. If I didn't expect it, I wouldn't invite you over, and since you're walking around in public this filthy, you must not have anything to clean up with at your house. Also, you mentioned not having what you need to wash up, meaning you've really got no convenient options other than me. I'm offering and you're accepting, now let's go. Wow. Naruto hesitated, surprised, but not bothered, by just how tactless Sakura had become. When did you turn into Tsunade? When I started studying under her 3 years ago, said the kunoichi, crossing her arms. Oh. Naruto was again taken back. We definitely have a lot to catch up on, it seems. Looks that way, said Sakura, so what do you say? What can I say? Asked the blonde, shrugging his shoulders and trying to come across as playful, but again only managing abrasive. Sakura rolled her eyes. We'll stop by your house so you can pick up a change of clothes and I'll throw something together once we get to my house. SC. Naruto had to admit, Sakura's well-heated indoor plumbing beat his plan of bathing in the river. The accommodations weren't bad at all either. Sakura had moved out from her small childhood home and settled into some new development and was now living alone. Apparently she'd been busy garnering fair amounts of money while working under Tsunade, as evidenced by her house. The two-story home sat in one of the more quiet, but still properly populated, parts of town. It had a spacious living room, dining room, bathroom, 2 spare rooms, one of which had been converted into a study with a massive bookshelf on every wall, and a kitchen on the first floor, while the second story consisted mostly of a master bedroom suite, an office, and a pair of rooms Sakura was currently using for storage. The pink-haired kunoichi hadn't exactly given Naruto a tour, rather leading him through the house quickly to minimize the mess he was tracking about, but many of the doors in the place had been open and Naruto had instinctively taken mental notes on everything around him. 3 years training under Jiraiya hadn't left him with nothing after all. Naruto stood in the large shower of the master suite on the second story. He'd not seen the whole house. Sakura had taken him straight up to the bathroom to minimize the amount of dirt he'd track, but as he soaked in the hot water it dawned on him just how tidy everything he had seen was. The house, even the high-traffic areas like the kitchen and living room, were absolutely pristine before he'd arrived. It must be driving her insane that I'm in here making a mess of everything, Naruto thought, but at least she hid it well. The blonde continued to rinse off, scraping the bits of hardened muck from his skin and vigorously running his fingers through his hair and over his scalp to remove any unsightly residue. Even with the aid of the steaming water and a large bar of soap, it still took nearly 20 minutes for the ninja to completely rid himself of the mud and grime. He reached out and turned off the water, but stood there in the middle of the shower for a minute as the fountainhead over him continued to trickle and ds. His blue eyes were clear as he looked up through the smoky glass of the shower door, though he still hadn't moved to get out. It's been almost 2 years since I had a real shower, he mumbled. And God, it beats cold lakes and rivers. I don't care what Jiraiya says about refreshing, but even so, this could take a lot of getting used to, even once I get my own place up and ready. Naruto slid the door open and stepped out into the big bathroom, grabbing a towel off of the rack and throwing it over his head. He began to rub it through his hair and then over his muscled frame, drying himself off. He then threw the towel around his waist and stepped up to the vanity and mirror. His amber sword and sheath and one of the Anbu combat suits Kakashi had given him before Naruto left Konoha with Jiraiya sat neatly folded next to the sink. Maybe not quite appropriate for a formal dinner, said the ninja, picking up the outfit and holding up the shirt section to examine, but it should do for something casual. His eye caught his reflection in the mirror and he began to look himself over, or more accurately, stare grudgingly at the scar that showed down his left arm. The twisted knot of skin was one of only 2 mementos that any fight had ever left on his body, and ironically enough, it was from a weapon that had once been his. The ninja glanced at the golden sword laying longwise across the vanity and grimaced, wondering what exactly had become of its partner. Naruto moved his arm just enough for the muscle beneath the mark to shift as he refocused his attention on himself. He didn't know why it refused to heal properly, though he guessed it had something to do with either the properties of sword that had slashed him open, or the chakra of the one who wielded said sword. As he relaxed his arm, his eyes traveled to his chest where the second of his 2 marks resided, a blotchy and colorless patch of skin in the shape of a long scratch directly over his heart. It was, again, a token of his fight with Sasuke that even soon it had been unable to remove. With a grunt, Naruto shook his head and pulled on his pants, then threw his long-sleeved shirt over his head and pulled it down, concealing both of the unsightly scars. At first he'd worn them almost proudly, like he heard war veterans do with their battle scars, but as time went by, he'd grown to dislike how obvious they were whenever he bathed, and eventually, to hate them. Little reminders of treachery and failure. Oh well, he muttered under his breath, putting it all out of his mind and fastening the sewn-in belt on his pants. It's not like there's anything that can be done about it now anyway. Looking back into the mirror once he was dressed, Naruto made sure he looked as presentable as he could in a suit made for combat, then opened the bathroom door and walked into the master bedroom. He couldn't help but admire the decor. It was very simple, but not quite minimalist. There was a comfortable-looking bed setting on dull burgundy carpet, a cherry-stained nightstand, and a simple picture of cherry blossom trees on an otherwise unadorned white wall. The dresser was small, about waist-high, and sat in a corner next to the bed. Wondering exactly how long dinner was going to last, Naruto strolled through the room and exited into the plain white hall. He reached the end and the stairs in a few of his unusually long strides. Instinctively he counted each step as he went. There were 12, down into the living room. Almost done, he heard Sakura say from what he guessed was the door to the kitchen. Give me about 5 minutes. Naruto glanced from his place at the bottom of the stairs into the dining room, probably the most expensively furnished room in the house, with a table that looked like it could easily seat 4, maybe 5 people, and an upholstered chair at each of table's corners. The walls were painted a quiet Titan hue that matched the Berber carpet nicely. Also there was a small bookcase against one of the walls. Why there was a bookcase in a dining room he wasn't sure. Which chair do you want me in? Naruto asked loudly enough for her to hear from the kitchen, trying to make small talk more than find out what she really thought. You can sit anywhere you want, Sakura called back. Or you could wait in the living room if you like. Thanks, said Naruto, pulling out one of the chairs by the table and sitting down. The seat was more comfortable than he'd expected, though it didn't really ease the tension of having to wait on dinner in a strange house with nothing to do but sit, so he began looking around. He turned behind himself and immediately saw the bookcase. Deciding there was no harm in a simple investigation, began scanning over the titles it held. The histories of ancient combat, a complete reckoning of ninja tactics, weapons and the given uses, the effects of genjutsu, a history of ninjutsu, senbon needles and how to use them. Naruto began mentally listing off the books stacked on the shelf. The vast majority of the 40 or so of them dealt with either combat, or the history of combat, though there were a few whose titles hinted at their being about ninja techniques. Aren't single girls supposed to keep trashy romance novels around the house? Naruto wondered, or is that just Kakashi? He continued scanning the books for another few seconds, just making a point to remember the authors, and not really taking interest in any of them until his eyes reached the bottom shelf. Maibu and the summation of Konoha's involvement. Naruto mumbled the title of the last book on the bottom shelf, strangely curious now. You look ancient. He leaned back in his chair and reached out, picking up the red leather-bound volume. The materials of the book crackled with age in his hand, but he gently set it down on the table and opened it up to the first page. He figured Sakura wouldn't mind. She was after all running a little behind, but he didn't mind. It's been 30 years now since the first Hokage and Uchiha Madara, the last soldiers of the long-gone village of Maibu, dueled in the Valley of the End, the edge of the Fire Country's territory. Naruto read quietly to himself, surprised by the mention of Maibu, the original home of the amber sword slung across his back. He read on, and since then no one knows what has become of the missing head of the once mighty Uchiha clan. One can assume his demise. Some say he faded into oblivion, while some think he still operates out of the shadows to this day. Still some assume he SD of the grievous wounds the first Hokage inflicted on him, but the fate of Uchiha Madara is likely never to be known. What can be conclusively stated now though is that with the death of the first Hokage, and the disappearance of Uchiha Madara, the last remnants of Maibu are gone, and thus, the last legacy of Konoha's past are left to the historians now. True, there are rumors that the Namikaze clan is descended from the lords of that village, but this can be neither proven nor disproven. I say this not to discourage those who know of the greatness of the village of Maibu, but rather to point out that a new age has begun, and that the Leaf Ninja, the descendants of that village, have a legacy that for the sake of the known world, they must live up to. For you see, I'm writing to tell you, dear reader, that when you study the ancient past you will undoubtedly be struck by the reality that hundreds of years ago, the world was a far less mild place. Great ninja-like warriors, hundreds of times as powerful as any cage today, battled demon invasions from the most monstrous fortresses of hell. Such battles literally tore the land apart and left utter desolation in their wakes. It was in this world, plagued by horrible monstrosities, that arose the first nation of Naruto. The blonde ninja started, and set the book down on the table. Looking up he saw that it was Sakura who had broken him out of his reading, and that she was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, holding a plate in either hand. Oh, sorry Sakura, Naruto said, composing himself. What did you say? Did I scare you? She asked, a playful smirk on her lips. Not really, he said, closing the volume and setting it aside on the table. I was just reading one of your books. Hope you don't mind. Not at all, said the kunoichi, walking forward and setting the plate, piled with SDSTSS of steak, and seasoned rice in front of him along with a set of chopsticks and a napkin. Which one of my little library of combat were you reading? Ah, the one about Maibu and the first Hokage, Naruto said. I didn't know if many other people knew about Maibu. Oh, that book, said Sakura, a slight bit of enthusiasm showing in her voice. I suppose not many people do. Have you read it all? Asked Naruto. Cover to cover, said Sakura. She sat down opposite Naruto and placed her plate, identical to Naruto's, in front of herself. What exactly was it about? Asked Naruto. Myths mostly, shrugged the kunoichi. The second Hokage's youngest brother, an avid but questionable historian, wrote it shortly after the second came to power. Questionable historian. Probed Naruto, taking a bite of the steak and mulling on it for a second. What do you mean by that? Delicious by the way. Glad you like it, said Sakura smiling. I'll need to restock tomorrow, but as for the second's brother, he makes a lot of allocations in there that we don't have any record of. He claims to have gotten them out of texts from the Uchiha he'd come across, but none of those docents have ever been found. Mumbled Naruto, what kind of things does he say exactly? He claims that a long time ago, like well before any of the villages today were formed, there were enormously powerful demons that could pass between our world and hell as easily as we walk out of a door, and that these demons hunted humans to the brink of extinction. Then some kind of super-powered beings, the predecessors of what a ninja today, came on the scene and drove them off. Then these warriors began forming villages, intermarrying with lesser people, you get the idea. Sounds interesting, Naruto said. Yeah, I liked it at least. Even if none of it turns out to be true, it still makes for an interesting story, said Sakura. You can have the book if you want. I don't really need it. Naruto finished another few bites of the steak before he glanced over at the red book and back at Sakura. I wouldn't want to just take it from you, he said. If it's as old as you hinted at it being, then it's got to be valuable. Value is subjective, said Sakura with a shrug. Besides, I understand how old it is and you're right, it is quite valuable. Still, if you want to read it you can have it. Maybe I'll borrow it from you, said Naruto grinning. He didn't want to come across as rude and refuse a potential gift, and he was interested in reading it, but at the same time he didn't want to just take something that he had no right to and no real need for. It's whatever you want to do, said Sakura. You might be interested to know he goes on to talk about the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Really? Naruto said hesitantly. I'll bite. What exactly did he say? I won't spoil it for you, said Sakura, but I will say that according to the book, no one in Konoha properly understands Bijou and especially the Kyuubi. Now I'll have to read it, said Naruto, throwing up a fake but almost believable smile. Yeah, Sakura mumbled, looking down and taking another few bites of the SD-up steak. Without saying anything else, the blonde ninja finished the last bit of his rice and began to set into the steak in earnest. After a few bites he realized that Sakura hadn't actually said anything, which led him to notice that neither had he and that the two of them had slipped into an unawkward silence. This is absolutely delicious. And it really is good to be back in Konoha, Naruto said. It's good to have you back, Sakura said grinning and looking up. And I'm glad you like the food. I'll be honest, I've never been much to cook. It's so much easier to just throw something together. Do you know how long it's been since I had a real meal? Like something more than a bowl of rice with river water to drink or some cheap gruel from a run-down inn? Asked Naruto. The kunoiki seed her head off to one side quizzically. Almost 2 years, said Naruto with a sigh. Not since Jiraiya and I left sooner. We always had to eat something incredibly quick on the go or we were too far from civilization to really sit down and enjoy things, and it's nice to be able to do that now. I guess you also denied yourself some of the luxuries while you were out, Sakura interjected. You've never been the kind to wildly indulge anyway. True, said Naruto hesitantly. I did make a habit of putting the job above anything else, but even so. You see what I'm saying? Sakura nodded. You're glad to be back, and it's good to have you back. Naruto nodded. How were things while I was gone? He asked. With a shrug, Sakura sat back from her half-finished plate. A lot's changed, and not necessarily for the better. I'm sure you've heard that Suna and Konoha are essentially staunch allies. Yeah, acknowledged Naruto, I was in when the alliance was finalized. It was good news. It's about the only good news. Sakura shook her head and crossed her arms. But all that's really changed around here's the politics. Do we really have to talk about politics? We can talk about whatever you want, Naruto said with a smile, though he regretted the words as soon as they'd left his lips. Well, what about you? Sakura asked. What about me? Naruto responded. Can we talk about you? Only if you like being bored, Naruto said, finishing up the last bit of rice on his plate. Nothing fascinating about me to discuss really. Of course, said Sakura smiling. A hero goes off to train with a legendary ninja for 3 years. They go all over the continent and have all kinds of untold adventures. You're right, nothing interesting there at all. Well, what about you? Asked Naruto amiably. You've been studying under Tsunade, you said. There have got to be some interesting stories there. Not really, said Sakura. But I'll make you a deal. What is it? Asked the blonde ninja. I'll tell you about my time with Tsunade, or at least the synopsis of it, if you'll give me the condensed version of what you did with Jiraiya. Tell me some of what happened out there. What's the world outside of Konoha's territory like? What are the other villages like? Well, said Naruto, giving in, Konoha's definitely one of the more civilized ninja villages. Don't get me wrong, Suna is alright if you like laws regulating everything there is to regulate about water, and the Cloud is fine you don't mind brutal police forces, but Konoha's by far the easiest place to live. Naruto sat back and chuckled as much to himself as anything as he recalled something. You should have seen how the sand guards in a village outside of Suna reacted, said the blonde ninja grinning, when they walked into Jiraiya's little rented house and found him in a homemade hot tub with two of the mayor's daughters on either side of him. Two of the mayor's daughters? Sakura noted, raising an eyebrow. Naruto nodded, still chuckling, and when they found his third daughter on the couch in the living room, passed out with a bottle of sake beside her, I thought they were going to try and K the old pervert. Did Jiraiya often have girls over to where the two of you were staying? Asked the kunoichi. More often than not, said the blonde. He was always, and I mean always, trying to pick up some girl a third his age. Most turned him down with a slap, and while he actually liked that part, he would still manage to find a few in every village who liked to party. Though sometimes I think he cheated and used some kind of mind trick. And were you at any of his parties? Asked Sakura. Normally I was out around the village. Remember we weren't often in towns or cities and when we were I tried to stay about and learn as much as I could. So you didn't hang around the wild scene and get drunk and fraternize with the teenage and 20-somethings your teacher had brought home? Sakura asked with all the tack of a war hammer. Absolutely not, Naruto answered calmly. First of all I don't drink anything even mildly intoxicating, and secondly most of the time I got back to wherever we were staying and all the guests were already passed out on the floor and Jiraiya was scribbling away in a book with his information. Good, said Sakura, her temper showing in a slight rosiness in her cheeks. Why do you ask? Naruto inquired. Just wanted to know. Fine, said Naruto, now I've kept my end of the deal and told you a story, now why don't you tell me something about what happened here while I was gone? The deal was for you to tell me all about what happened while you were gone, said Sakura with a smirk. Right, said Naruto, glancing out the window. Well, it's kind of a long story. I've got time, said Sakura, leaning forward and resting her elbows on the table. If I tell you the whole story, said Naruto, then you have to promise me that at some point you'll tell me about your apprenticeship under Tsunade. Deal, said Sakura. Good, said the blonde with a grin. Where do you want me to start? X. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.